do whatever the Hyundai you want.
Hey, I'm Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
G'day, I'm Marcus Ambrose.
Hey, this is Kenny Wallace, and you're listening to
The Fuel Pod.
This podcast covers all things motorsports. It's unfiltered, it's unmasked, and
Ooh, we're going crazy. All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to episode 71 of the Fuel Pod. This episode we're calling Hell's Bells because A, it was a good song. AC/DC wrote a good one there. And also because we had a basically living heat storm, hellish landscape in Qatar this past weekend for the Formula One Grand Prix being held there. And then we had some heat going on in Charlotte this weekend at the Roval for the NASCAR playoffs. So we've got an interesting show tonight. We're going to try to get through some of the Qatar stuff and then the playoffs. And then we got a little bit of a debate tonight, maybe just us just waxing philosophical about different track types, Mikey. So welcome to the show again tonight, man. How you doing? Oh, you're muted, buddy. You are muted. Woo-hoo.
Hey, I'm still glad to be here.
There. All right, man. So the debate,
Hell's Bells, right?
Yeah, Hell's Bells. So the debate topic tonight, actually, I got inspired this weekend. I was on Peacock, and I was watching Dale Jr.'s. He's got a show on there called Lost Speedways, where he travels around the country and going to some of these just unsung hero of speedways, and he started at Metrolina, which is like just a little bit north of Charlotte. And he, because his dad raced there, and so did his grandpa. And then he basically just travels around going to all these tracks. And I know he's not watching the show, but man, if he was, I'd tell him go to Ono, West Virginia. There's a great racetrack. It was already closed by the time I was even a little boy. But I know my grandpa was telling me they used to, and it was a hardball track in West Virginia, which, a tarmac track back then in a rural state like that was insane already. By the time I was a little boy, the only thing people were using it for was driving high-end RC cars on it. But anyway, I started thinking, as we had the Roval this weekend, then there's always controversy when NASCAR runs on not an oval. But I started thinking, and then watching the F1 race, and not as much the race as the sprint. I felt like the sprint was more fun to watch than the actual race. Because there was these guys only had 19 laps to show what they had. And it was, like I said earlier, it was complete carnage. So you take all those factors together, the Dale Jr. show and the Roval and carnage at Qatar. And I started thinking, what's the value of all because we always argue. And, you'll hear people say, well, F1 is better, or NASCAR is better, or GT racing trumps all the others, because they have amateur drivers that still race with pros and yada, 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 and all that stuff. But, I think racing is different to each person, the person that's watching it. And we're going to get to that topic here shortly, but let's start with Formula One. And we were obviously at Qatar in Doha in the Middle East, and the race was at night, and it was still 111 degrees on the track. Take a second, let that sink in, and wrap your mind around that. And then imagine you're sitting in a car with little to no ability to move around, with ridiculous G-forces, in a fire retardant suit, with a helmet and a balaclava on, going 190 plus miles an hour. And you got a power plant sitting right under your ass. And you start burning. So we had a crazy weekend. Mikey, what was your thoughts on our weekend?
I didn't think about it either until earlier today when I was talking to a friend. The wind blowing the sand. Not only did it was making it slick, but God, just sand pelting your helmet, your face mask constantly as you're driving it. With everything else, it's just a miserable experience for them.
Yeah, and I can tell you could tell that the drivers just wanted to get the race over with and get out of there and move on to the next one. And that's one of the few times you see that every year. It really is. Even and this isn't me picking on the desert or picking on the Middle East by any stretch of the imagination, because Bahrain opens the season
Mhm.
and the drivers like going there. Then they go to Abu Dhabi and they like going there, and they go to Jeddah and they love going. And Jeddah's wonderful, a beautiful track. Um, but then this Qatar thing, and they did do excellent work at Qatar this year, improving the paddock, and it was a really festive atmosphere. But the race was just, I'm sure it was fun for us and just absolutely a complete shit show for them. So it feels like they're the ones that took one for the team so that we could enjoy, some entertainment. And they didn't disappoint. My team suffered a small hit with Carlos Sainz not being able to start the race. An hour before the race, he's got a fuel system issue. So he's pulled from the race, and it was only his second did not start in his career. But just some news about the race. As lap one, turn one, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, who are teammates on Mercedes, get into each other in turn one, go off the track. Hamilton's completely out. Of course, you got Hamilton saying, I got pushed off by my teammate. And you got Russell saying, I got pushed off by my teammate. Russell was able to get his damage repaired and get back out on the track. And did an excellent job, by the way, the rest of the race. I don't know if you got to really dig into it, but he did so many outside line passes. It was kind of fun to watch. And I'm not the biggest, I think everybody knows I'm not the biggest Russell fan, but the
I
guy's
don't
got,
know anybody that is.
yeah, I'm always willing to admit talent, and that kid's got some talent, man. And did a really excellent job finishing that race when he could have easily just inwardly imploded after the Lewis Hamilton. And I don't want to leave a bad taste in anybody's mouth on the Lewis Hamilton thing. I'm just saving it for when I get to my podiums and back markers, because I've got some explaining to do, as we say back here.
I got you a little something on Hamilton there. It sucked. I was telling you earlier about me having a couple of friends over. A friend of mine, his son came over, first time watching an F1 race. And of course, it's a shit show, and I've got to explain all this. But what sucked is they're all fired up and they're ready to go, and they're going to pick their driver, right? Who they're going to root for. Well, I was kind of telling them some of the drivers, and little Sam, he's fifth grader, right?
Yeah.
He really took to Sir Lewis Hamilton. He's an actual knight. Oh, that's my guy. That's my guy right there.
Wow.
He's so excited.
Little kids usually immediately go to Ferrari because of the red car.
Thinking first, and he's gone. I'm like, here I am trying to introduce F1 to these guys, and everything's falling apart for me.
Yeah. But you said they ended up liking it, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
So who did the dad pick as his
Lando
driver?
Lando.
That's not a bad call, and we'll talk about some of that here in just a second. But that's a really good call if it's your first time. Had they watched any Drive to Survive to get any like background on some of the drivers, or are they strictly race?
I sent him one episode because we made a deal.
Yeah.
And that I was going to follow the Texas Rangers through their playoff run. If he would follow one, give me one weekend of a Formula One. Yes, they are.
Okay.
And so I sent him an episode, and he shot back. He goes, I think I need to watch a few more episodes. I don't know if he 1, 2, 3 more he watched, but then he did the sprint race. He watched it all.
Okay.
And I really, really, really think he enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's that part of the sprint shootout. I like the sprints. I think most Americans would say we like the sprints because there's a lot of razzle dazzle with those as opposed to the standard canned F1 weekend. But that's cool that they got to enjoy their very first race, and I think there was a lot of action, man. I don't know how anybody would say there wasn't a lot of action in that race. So you get the lap one, turn one wreck, and then you get Perez acting a fool later on. You got Russell trying to go around the outside on Gasly, and Gasly being like, bitch, please, that first time around. And then the second time around, he got him. So that was kind of cool. You got Alonso, the the grizzled old veteran. I think he went off the track twice trying to hold that car on the track while his right ass cheek was burning. More on that
Yeah,
later.
no joke.
So it was a really cool thing. It actually when Russell and Hamilton got into it, I thought of the movie Hot Fuzz with Simon Pegg. When they go up on the traffic wreck and he calls it an accident. He's like, actually, department guidelines stipulate that we refer to it as a traffic collision because an accident implies that no one is guilty. So, I immediately thought of that. But anyway, that part was cool. So on to Fernando Alonso. Middle of the race, calls his pit crew, says, hey, when I come into pits, is there any way you could pour water on me or something? Because I'm burning, man. I'm burning. And as it happens, the FIA has a rule that you cannot splash water on the driver or sprinkle them with water or spray them with water to cool them down. So as he gets into the pits and he's thinking, man, I'm about to get washed down with water. Guess what? Nothing. So the guy and the FIA gets to hear all these onboard comms. So they know the guy's burning up. And he had legitimate minor burns because the heat was coming right through the seat. And only Aston Martin had that problem as far as anybody knows. But still, it's a problem. You're talking about driver safety at this point, and that needs to be, first and foremost to me, in the FIA situation. It's, let's have a great race. But, let's make sure all of our drivers are A, alive afterwards, and B, are safe and able to continue with their racing career the following week or 2 weeks from now. So,
it was all right there together. Right before Alonso, I think you had George Russell going down the front stretch, and he's holding his hands up trying to get himself some air.
Yeah, going 198 miles an hour.
Yeah, let him just.
Did you see his hands?
Yes.
They're like,
I thought maybe he was cramping.
I was like, magic hands, magic hands.
And then everybody going into the pit, their first move is flipping that visor. Give me some air.
Yeah.
Give me some air.
Yeah, even exiting the pits, they kept their visor open until right before they hit the white line, which I thought was, that was crazy. So we had an absolute slew of heat casualties at the end of this race. And the funny thing was, we didn't hear anything about this. Actually, what really lit it up was Lando when he came in for his post-race interview, after when they do the post-race show with Will Buxton and whoever he's got that week on the show with him. And Lando was like, yeah, it's super hot. There's like 6 drivers passed out back there. And then all of a sudden it started hitting Twitter and it started hitting the Formula One website. But so about 6 drivers apparently passed out. Esteban Ocon in the number 31 Alpine vomited in his helmet during the race. And as you and I were talking before the show, he's still racing like that with a balaclava on. I don't even want to imagine the optics on that.
I think he said it was lap 15.
Yeah, that's disgusting. Out of a 57 lap race, he went 45 laps, 43 laps with vomit in his balaclava, just basically riding around on his neck.
Yeah.
So that's gross. Alex Albon had to be taken to the medical center. Lance Stroll passed out. And I'm watching the race with Redbeard, and Logan Sargent, we were making fun of him, sort of, because he's like, they're like telling him to come in, and he's like, no, I can finish. I promise I can do this. I can do this. Well, then he finally did retire, and we're like, what a wuss. And then find out he was actually probably the smart one. He just.
My first thought when he came on the radio and they were saying that was they're just trying to save some money. Get him in here before he crashes something and costs us more money.
Well, yeah, and you're talking about a team like Williams who's only getting a couple $1 million in constructor money at the end of the year. And don't quote me on that amount, but I know it's super low. So they've probably only got like one of everything. Whereas you got teams that are hitting the cap or right at the cap that you've got 3 or 4 copies of everything. Williams doesn't have that. So yeah, I can absolutely see where that would be your thought going into that. But yeah, I was thinking, man, this dude is definitely done now if he retires from this race. And now I feel like a complete shithead
Yeah.
because so many drivers, so many guys that have been around for a while were done at the end of this thing. So it was a complete disaster from a driver perspective, but some decent entertainment for us. We would be remiss, though, dude, if we did not talk about, and we've been talking about it for 2 or 3 weeks, but a absolutely resurgent McLaren team come out of nowhere. I've never been more happy to be wrong. One of the things I did say at the beginning of this season on this show was that the sad thing is we need McLaren to be a good team. There's really 3 teams that need to be decent. McLaren is one of them. Ferrari is one of them. You can throw Mercedes in there, but it's starting to the clock's starting to turn towards Red Bull instead. I think the big appeal to Red Bull, besides the fact that they're excellent and unstoppable, is that I think they appeal to the younger generation. It's an energy drink. It's all about hype and adrenaline, and Red Bull's into so many different facets of that culture.
Flute dog.
Yeah, absolutely. Whereas, Ferrari and McLaren, for us old farts that have been watching racing for a long time, we need, whether you like them or hate them, you need Ferrari and McLaren to be successful because that breeds competition from all the other manufacturers. So to see McLaren come on this strong with their 2 or 3 upgrade packages and their driver lineup, man, is excellent. I mean, Lando's basically the McLaren version of Max Verstappen, and Piastri just kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, he had that debacle last year with Twitter and Alpine and all that, but yeah, man, he's doing excellent. I don't know what your thoughts are with McLaren, but
they're very
I'm
impressive.
happy
Very
for us.
impressive. I don't remember. I think I texted you at the beginning of the season when my daughter was trying to find her way into F1, and I said, "Man, I think I may have a McLaren fan on my hand." Dude, I'm becoming a McLaren fan really quick.
Yeah, I mean it's hard not to be. As a Ferrari guy, so for Ferrari fans, it's probably a lot like the Red Sox and the Yankees. And any real Red Sox fan will tell you that we have to have the Yankees because without them, there wouldn't be that rivalry. And you look at Ferrari and you go back to the 70s, even when you're talking about, well, I mean, they made the movie a few years ago, the Niki Lauda, James Hunt. And you go back to those days, or you go beyond Formula One into Le Mans and you talk about Ferrari and their place in that, and Bruce McLaren and his place in history, winning the 24-hour in the Ford. So they've got a story, and you look at, I don't know if you've ever seen any documentaries on McLaren's their technology center that they basically their corporate headquarters. Just the history and the lineage of all those cars parked in the lobby, just absolutely gorgeous. Ayrton Senna and Lauda and all those guys. So, Ferrari needs McLaren, McLaren needs Ferrari, and Formula One definitely needs both of them. But just happy to see McLaren come along and really make a resurgence at the end. And, the sad thing is it's going to be at the cost of probably my second favorite team, which is Aston Martin. Because they've got 2 drivers getting in the points consistently now. And Aston Martin's got 1 driver getting in the points who's 42 years old and another driver that couldn't find his ass with directions in a GPS. So, it's really tough. But anyway, hats off to Zach Brown and what he's been able to accomplish in a few years at McLaren, especially
McLaren,
since 2018.
McLaren together, and it just hit me. You know where the turning point was for McLaren?
Where?
When they sent that Solus up Goodwood. Ever since they sent that car up the hill, McLaren has been on the uprise.
That's true. That's true. And whoa, not pee. That's a beverage. Anyway, last but not least, I think, again, speaking of being remiss, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about it, but the week after week meltdown of Sergio Perez. A driver that even a year ago, if you'd have said, "Hey, how do you feel about Red Bull Racing?" Well, not a big Max fan, but I love Checo. But Checo, what have you done for me lately? And the answer to that is effing zero, man. You've done nothing.
Nothing.
They introduced Danny Ricciardo in the mix, who's been a non-factor, by the way, for Checo. But it's like his whole world went full on whatever that Michelle Yeoh movie was, Everything Everywhere All at Once. And he's just completely had a meltdown. So he had, and he wasn't the only one, so let's be clear, but he's the one in the spotlight. He had 3 5-second penalties for track limits. So did Pierre Gasly, but Pierre Gasly's on Alpine and Checo's on Red Bull Racing. Max Verstappen had 0. He was the only driver that had 0 even warnings for track limits. That whole place was a track limit fiasco, as far as I'm concerned. It was almost as bad as the 15 or 100 or so call-outs they had at Red Bull Ring this year. But yeah, just bungled it again, man. At what point do you? And I know Helmut Marko wants to cut strings now. It's probably Christian Horner's the only thing saving Checo's career right now. So,
and I was going to get to it on my back markers because I've got Checo there, but
hold it.
Really, it's just Red Bull's. It's a toxic place for Sergio Perez.
Yeah,
and he's only making it worse on himself. The best place for him is not Red Bull.
Yeah, no kidding,
So
man.
maybe he needs to look before he gets canned.
Yeah, and I think it's
driving like he has been though. Who wants him?
It's going to be a win, at more than an if, dude. At this point, and I feel sorry for him in a way because, man, he is, when he wants to be, he is a lights out technical driver, and he's super on defense. He's super coming from the back of the field. But the last few races have just been, I don't even know what to tell you. They've been awful. I don't think he'd have been able to keep his job at Williams if driving like the way he's been driving past 4 or 5 races. So just awful, dude. All right, man. You got any more from F1, or can we move on to the NASCAR playoffs?
Oh, nothing. Did you get Lance Stroll's meltdown he had?
Oh my goodness!
Really?
So
pushing his trainer around, and
yeah. So this was before even the race. This was during the sprint shootout. So Lance Stroll, obviously not happy with how that turned out, gets out of his car, goes into the garage. He's being followed around, and all these drivers get followed around by their physio, trying to lift him up, and because they got fragile egos. And I guess he's trying to help him out, this and that. But the camera kind of fades to Stroll walking around the back of the garage area, heading towards the paddock, I suppose. And he basically picks his physio up off the ground and throws him into a wall, which is absolutely unacceptable, number one. And 2, I still have not heard any kind of consequences coming out of that, either by the FIA or by Aston Martin F1, or hell, from his dad, who runs the team.
Well, I don't know if you saw or not, but before he pushed that guy, he threw his steering wheel, broke it.
I didn't even see it. Yeah, and those steering wheels are not cheap. So, I mean, unless you've got $48 billion laying around like Lawrence Stroll, maybe, but don't quote me on that amount. I have no idea what but I'm sure it's in the billions. But, still throwing an F1 steering wheel around, yeah, not going to happen. So anyway, yeah, that was the F1 weekend in a nutshell. But let's move on to some, and kind of going to go vintage here with the show, and we're going to do a little intro video for the NASCAR just to get in that kind of mood. And here we go.
It's time for the NASCAR Minute.
But for right now, crank it up.
Yeah, I've heard that in a while.
Okay.
It's time.
Yeah, man. It's a while back. I
for
decided
the
to say that.
NASCAR Minute.
Oh, you muted?
Yeah, I think it tried to do it twice there. Not my
Yeah,
fault.
yeah, it
Sorry, a
did.
little technical difficulty. But we're running content and anchor and production and video and audio. So
It sounded
it's
so
kind of
nice. Had to play it twice.
yeah. So we were racing. I guess you can still call it uncharacteristically on not an oval at Charlotte. Charlotte being one of a lot of people's one of their favorite tracks, and it is a wonderful speedway. But this was on the Roval, which is the NASCAR term for a road course. I mean, technically, it's a road course. It's a closed circuit road course, but playoff race. This was a big one because we were at the cutoff for the grade 8 or the elite 8 or whatever you want to call the top 8 drivers. And man, I don't know if you got to see any of the race or watch any of the highlights. Man, it was a fun race for me to watch. And yeah, I'm biased. Yes, I like road courses. A lot of that stems from being an F1 fan, true, and a GT fan. Um, or GT World Challenge or IMSA or IndyCar or anybody else that runs road courses. And yeah, I realize that's not their main bag running those
You like
because
right turns.
I do. I like multiple types of turns. And it is weird seeing a NASCAR try to ride a curb. They just don't do it right. And it's not their fault. It's the car, obviously. But man, it produced some fun racing. Some decent clashes out there and no real big one to speak of, which I thought was cool. They raced a pretty clean race. Denny Hamlin got squirrely there towards the end a little bit. Michael McDowell went, I don't know what, I think he lost his mind for a little bit. He had a flat tire and it felt like he was the only one on the track that didn't know he had a flat tire. So he kept trying to drive and he was just running people into the wall. Eric Jones in the 43 car was doing his best Ricky Spenhouse impression. He spun out 2 or 3 times. But one of the things that really, as I'm watching these playoffs, and this playoff season has been fun to watch. But Chris Bell, it feels like he has been on the pole every single race. And you're kind of an old school NASCAR fan, aren't you? Going back. You remember all those times, all those years back when Ryan Newman was young?
Oh yeah.
And he would run qualifier setups on his race car during the race. And that was back when he was one of those guys that was just constantly up there. Hardly ever won a race, but he was constantly up there. And I don't know why Chris Bell gives me Ryan Newman vibes, but he does. But anyway, he had an excellent race and he ran strategically Sunday, which I thought was cool. Instead of just going for his stage win, he fought for his playoff points, which ended up being the way to go for him. And a lot of teams really played less on, hey, I have to win this thing like you do at an oval, and more of, I need to be strategically in the best place to help me survive and be, in the playoffs. Now, so you got Byron and Blaney guaranteed spots because they have wins in the playoffs. Denny Hamlin locked in his position. So we have until October 30th at Martinsville, I guess, before they drop down to 4. But let me pull up I'm going to pull up the playoff standings right now. So in the top 4, which these guys are safe right now, but William Byron, Martin Truex Jr., Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson. But on the bubble, these guys could get eliminated unless they beat out one of those guys. Chris Buescher, Christopher Bell, who we just talked about, my guy Tyler Reddick, and Ryan Blaney. And of course, Blaney had that win last week that was awesome. But again, watching the Roval, and I know everybody's going to have their opinion on this. I thought there was some really excellent wheel-to-wheel action that you normally don't see in a NASCAR race, but you see in pretty much everything else. And some really good curb riding, which isn't their cup of tea, obviously. There was a couple of guys that hit the curb and immediately the right end spun out. And I'm like, buddy, you got to fully mount the sausage. you can't half-ass a curb ride. You've got to either mount it or not. So pick one and go with it. But in the end, it was my boy Ding Dingalinger MFers that took that win. AJ Allmendinger, it's a no consequence win. He's not in the playoffs, but it was excellent to see him come over the line. And that was the first thing I did was I was like, hey, Ding-a-Linger won. So they're moving on to Las Vegas this week, which ought to be interesting. And then, of course, F1's going to be there in a few weeks. But, yeah, it'll be interesting to watch that race and kind of see. I feel like Denny Hamlin's going to be on kind of a rager after this past weekend because he had a good race going and it kind of fell apart on him there at the end. And then, of course, you got those guys in the bottom four. They're going to be beating feet trying to get in that top four. So, anyway, you can, of course, watch that race this weekend on NBC and then catch the live replay later if you can't watch it live on Peacock, as well as the post-race shows usually on Peacock. So, make sure you guys watch that this weekend and give it a go. But looking forward to seeing how it pans out this season. I don't think my boy Reddick's going to be able to hold in there and win it. But you look at Denny. Denny's got some skin in the game. So he's in there. And, of course, he owns part owner of 2311 Racing. So he's got him and Reddick in there. So he could either pull out a win for Joe Gibbs or pull out a win for himself. So we'll see how it goes. You ready to move on to podiums, man?
Hey, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so my podium for this week on the Fuel Pod. We'll start in P3, third place, is Lewis Hamilton. And you're going to be like, well, Jay, you just were talking about how Hamilton took out Russell lap 1, turn 1 of that race. How is he on your damn podium? And you just now were saying that he called out on the radio, my teammate took me out. Well, here's the thing. After the race, he watched the video feed, and then he got on social media and said, hey, I just got done watching the video. It was absolutely my fault. How many people would do that, man? Not a lot. But the 7-time world champion, who I used to not be able to stand, Humble Hamilton, owned up to his mistake. Humble Ham took his accountability for his actions. And for that, sir, anytime anybody does that, you're going to land on my podium. Number 2, P2. Oscar
Hang on, Jay.
Piastri,
Let me say something about that real fast.
Okay, go for it.
So you have a Hamilton at P3. That is a Max Verstappen level accomplishment. Max Verstappen won a race with Red Bull having 2 DNFs. Hamilton goes out lap 1, turn 1, and gets on the podium.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll take it.
Okay. Yeah. Sometimes actions speak louder than results. Piastri, number 2, P2 on my podium. Here's a guy that's his first year in Formula One, and he won the sprint race. He's got a win for McLaren, which is something Lando doesn't even have. Although, I think they made a little bit too much hay about him getting a win before Lando did, because it actually wasn't a race. It was just the sprint race. And Lando's going to get his. I'm not real worried about that. And, both of them are excellent racers. But, I'll give the experience end of it to Lando. And then first on my podium is McLaren for just coming out of nowhere, literally coming out of the cellar, coming from the doldrums, and making a resurgence towards the end of the season. So that's my podium. Mikey, to you.
All right, on my podium at P3, I want to put Zhou Guan Yu. And here's the reason. He didn't let me forget that Alfa Romeo existed.
Wow, and you picked on my P3?
How many times during the race did they show, somebody's trying to get around? I couldn't get him on this time. He couldn't.
Yeah,
constantly.
you're right.
And I know Bottas finished higher than him, but he's still the mustache guy. I'm sorry. He's still forgettable.
Yeah, I think of Starsky and Hutch every time I look at Bottas, man.
And me and my daughter was talking during the race, and like, why do we always forget about them? That they're there. Them and Alpine seems like, oh yeah. But he didn't let me forget that Alfa Romeo was racing. So he's my P3. Okay. At P2, and you thought I was joking, but I'm going to put at 2Diddy4 for 8 out of 10 on his F1 play predictions. Oh, that's me, isn't it? Unbelievable week.
You'll get a queen's applause. Congratulations.
All right, and my top slot has got to be 3-time world champion Max Verstappen.
Wow. Shocker. Seriously.
Yeah.
Come on.
I mean, as much as we
Wow.
don't want to, you've got to give it to him. He's so dominant.
Yeah, you just get tired of putting him on the. We need like a 3-2-1 star and put him on like the. I mean, it's ungodly, man, what he's done this year and how dominant he's been. And I realize, and we do give him a lot of credit, but I still don't think he's getting enough. Is Adrian Newey, the guy that built that car? That thing is a beast. And what kills me the most is not how good it is. It's that nobody else has figured it out. Nobody else on the grid has, like, what did he do that we're not doing? Here we are, 17 races in, and they haven't even come close. You've got teams changing their side pods to make them look like Red Bull, and still nothing. You got nothing.
It's got to be something underneath, right?
Yeah. You figure it's got to be something. Anyway, so that was your podium. And then we've got the losers, man. We've got the guys that didn't do so hot this week, or the organizations or the groups that didn't do so hot. So third place for me is the family that is Stroll. So Lawrence Stroll, Lance Stroll, any other Strolls, Strollers, anything Stroll. So you got Lawrence, and I realize it's a business, and I realize he's a dad. And if it were my son, I'd have just as hard a time. But maybe this is where he recuses himself from the decision entirely, because somebody needs to address the fact that Lance Stroll is not driving to an F1 standard right now, and hasn't been for a while. And in a car that should be at the least P4, P5 on most races, and up there with Alonso. He's not even getting close to his teammate, who is 42 years old. And before anybody thinks I'm picking on age, I'm 49. So I think what Fernando does is unparalleled in the F1 racing community, to have that kind of reaction time at that age. Absolutely ridiculous. But here's Lance Stroll, who's mid-20s and can't even hang on his jock, dude. It's bad news.
The constructors. I mean, you look at the first of the season, number 2. Oh yeah, they are good, and they just continue to fall down, because they've only got one car that can.
Yeah, now it's gonna be Red Bull, and then Mercedes, Ferrari, and then probably McLaren. They're gonna fall twice, I think. So, it's gonna be ugly. Number 2 is Checo for just completely blowing it again this week. And I'm not even going to say any more about it other than, he's on my back marker list. But last but not least is the FIA. They've been on my back marker list probably 3 or 4 times in the 2 or 3 seasons we've done this show. I think they really drive. And it's not all their fault. And I think a lot of people are going to, and I'm probably doing the same thing, giving the FIA undue blame on this. But some of the fault falls to Pirelli, who really made just a horrible call on tire compounds and what they were able to do. And it was Pirelli that forced the FIA's hand on the whole 18 laps and you got a pit bit, which just absolutely changes everybody's strategy, changes the whole outlook of the race and how we watch it. When there's really, they're coming in, you know what I mean? Instead of, hey, when's this team going to come in? It really came down to undercuts in a lot of ways, because you saw Fernando come in on lap 12, and then everybody else came in on 13 after Fernando did. And then the horrible safety calls with the heat. I mean, if you're already going to mandate an 18 lap, change your tires, give them a 2-minute break, for God's sakes. Let them sit in the pits for 2 minutes.
Hey, we changed rules on things all weekend long.
Yeah.
All weekend long, we were changing rules.
Make it up as we go.
And we can't change one for safety.
Yeah. And this is one of those races where, so if you don't know this, the only person that can talk to a driver during the race is the race engineer. Everybody thinks the team principal can, but they can't. So while they're sitting there just watching the telemetry on the race, and I'm talking about the team principals now, put them on a conference call and go, hey, what do you guys want to do? Your drivers are out here burning up. Can we, and just, they should have just had a race long conference call. Hey, do you want to bring them in for 5 minutes and then we'll just do a rolling start or a grid start again or whatever? Because the wrong answer, regardless of what the fans think, the wrong answer is anything that puts a driver in jeopardy, man, as far as I'm concerned. So they
have to know this is going on, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they can see everything.
They can hear the internal comms on the team. They're watching the race. They've got a whole slew of people, and I think it's in England. Those are the ones that do the track limits, guys. And that's a whole room of people watching the track limit monitors.
I mean, Total Wolf's in a whole nother country, and he can see everything that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Surely they can see this at the track.
Correct. And they should have, and they did not. So anyway, and that's really all I've got to say on my back markers, man. So you can go for it. All
right. Well, my number 3 was same as that. We've covered that. 2 was Checo. And here's something I seen Checo say in an interview about his track limits, that the lines were difficult to see and that it was all BS, that they changed the lines. Well, he only went out that spot between 12 and 13, I think.
Yeah.
Once. It was other places he was missing too. He's, I don't know, in this run of bad driving, he's had a lot of excuses. And that's why I put excuses are like buttholes.
Yeah.
You know, everybody has one. They all stink. Shut up. Drive the dang car, Checo.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my top back marker, and I'm done with it, man. Because my daughter brought it up during the race.
Yeah, please explain this to me.
All right. So you know the camera angle they have, I guess it's from inside their visor.
Yeah, it's inside the helmet.
And all it is a big freaking glare. You can't see shit. Now, 5 inches above their head is another camera. Pretty much gives the same perspective. Perfectly clear. Well,
I think the idea
get rid of the glare cam. It does me no good.
I don't call it the glare cam, but I like the glare cam, and I'm going to tell you why. Because it wouldn't be glaring if it was a daytime race. In a nighttime race, you're going to get the glare because of the lights. But what I think it does for people, and it's not even about seeing the race, I think it's showing you the limited visibility that these drivers have inside these helmets. And it's showing you just how good these guys are, man. To be able to race, and that car is just, first you got the G-forces, then you got the vibration of the car just going crazy. Then you're wheel to wheel on tight Singapore circuits at night, or it's raining. When they did the glare cam last year at Japan and the absolute pouring down rain, I'm literally sitting here going, there's no way I would be behind the wheel of my personal car in this. And these guys are getting hammered with the rain.
It's not entertaining for me. It's
okay. Well, to each his own.
The one that right above their head, perfectly fine.
The TV pod.
I believe you. I believe you that these drivers are so good. And the conditions are so horrible. Take your word for it. Give me a clear picture.
Okay. And I agree, and I can hear, I see that too and feel that. So I understand what you're saying. Like I said, I think it's less for showing us race perspective and more showing us, look how good these guys are. Look what they're doing.
If it would have picked up Ocon's bulge of vomit, that would have been cool.
Yeah, especially during Halloween. Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. So that finishes that up, and that brings us to our great track circuit debate. So if you're here in the U.S., it's a racetrack or a speedway. If you're across the pond, we know it's a circuit, and that's fine. But I want to talk, and this isn't an argument of any one particular type of racing over another, whether it be NASCAR, Formula One, IndyCar, WEC, rally cross, GT racing, whatever you want to call it. This is more about the value of each type of track. And so I will start, oddly enough, with the oval. And we'll talk about what we like about ovals and what we don't like about ovals. So, do you want to start or you want me to go?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. So, I think you got to break ovals down into short track and super speedway racing. I think that's really your two biggest classifications. So, you look at a track like Talladega. Oddly enough, Talladega this year was kind of exciting to watch, but a lot of years you get what's called pack racing, where you just get these guys and it's just one. It's almost like a school of fish, man. And they're just all moving together in unison, and it's around the track. Not a huge fan of that. I don't know how anybody. Yeah, I don't know how anybody is, but a lot of people are. And again, racing is. There's a lot of people that have a lot of things that draw them to racing, but I bet you, without a doubt, every single person. There's one little thing about racing that probably nobody else has that person sees. You know what I mean? It's a little bit different for everybody. So you look at tracks like Talladega, it's a super speedway. You look at Daytona, Texas Motor Speedway, even though we had a good race there this year. A little bit of Charlotte and some of those types of tracks where there's a lot of pack racing and it's staying in the draft and getting around the track. Not the biggest fan. Now you put me at Martinsville or Richmond or Bristol, where the track is so small that the front of the field is already on the back of the field by the time the green flag drops. That's fun racing. At that point, it almost reminds you of old school dirt track racing because you're constantly in traffic. And I think for fans, that's a big deal because there's constant action to keep them entertained. But, the cons I definitely would say are pack racing. And then you've got the weirdo ovals that actually aren't ovals at all, like Pocono, that's shaped like a triangle. It's shaped like a pool rack in a lot of ways. So it's one of those things where Pocono's, Indy's a crazy weird track. And you can get sideways there very fast if you miss those capstone turns there. So I love Indy, man. It's such a wonderful track. Unfortunately, I'd much rather watch IndyCar at Indy than I would NASCAR at Indy, but it's still fun. And that's simply based on speed and the fact that these guys are flying by the seat of their pants on IndyCar. But those are my feeling on ovals, man. So how about you?
Ovals, just like you said, the pack racing. Now, I like the pack racing at the end.
Okay.
When the anticipation is built up there, everybody's just on the edge where it's about to happen. Is it going to happen? Oh, here it's going to happen. No, it didn't happen. Okay. And then you watch this other line. You usually get, good 10 laps.
Right.
Before it gets boring. And they're just riding around together.
Yeah.
So at the end on a super speedway is really exciting. It's going to end in disaster, but it's exciting. Now, when you get to Bristol, Martinsville, those places, now that's NASCAR. That's Robbins racing. That's
that's the heart and
reason
soul.
Reason we don't have a window so we can spit our tobacco out the side.
Yeah. Yeah. That's some really good racing, man. And like I said, I think that's the heart and soul of NASCAR. But like a lot of sports, they have to evolve, and these cars have gotten so fast, and then they've been slowed down. Then they got fast again, and I do like the new next gen car. I mean, I know there's drivers and fans alike that don't like it, but at least they don't all look the same. When I was younger, and I'm talking like right after college and whatnot. And that's when the car of tomorrow came out, and that thing was a certified piece of shit, at least from a fan standpoint. All they did was it was the same car no matter what manufacturer you were driving, and they just slapped the stickers on it, and it just dumbed the sport down. And I feel like it took them a lot of years to recover from that car, even though it eventually probably got in a good spot where they enjoyed driving it. I mean, I can't guarantee that that's what happened, but still. Um, but that brings me to our next track type because it's just going to flow into from NASCAR into the other types of racing. But so NASCAR introduced the Rovals, and they've been around for a while. But you have the Daytona infield course, um, which still has the two capstone areas of the circuit and the trioval, but then has that infield part that goes around. And dude, some of them turns there are just dastardly turns, man, and where you're coming to an almost complete stop to
Yeah.
get around them. But so let's just take Rovals generically. I like them because I like road courses, and to me, that's what's important to me is what I like, just like it is for anybody else. And I like seeing the action that, as long as the cars are close, I like the action that a road course generates because you've got to fight for every inch you get. It's not all about the draft on a Roval. It's about maneuvering. It's about hitting the apexes on your turns and corners, and knowing how to drive a car. And I think that's important. It's a different skill set to be sure, but you look at the NASCAR drivers that hate racing Bristol dirt. It's because they didn't come up on dirt. A lot of NASCAR racers come from either two different things. They either come from like karts where they're on tarmac, or they come from dirt track racing. So the ones that come from dirt track racing obviously are going to like Bristol dirt, and the ones that didn't don't. You look at Jeff Gordon and Kyle Larson and those guys. When they would race Sears Point or Sonoma now, they did very well because that's kind of the background they had. So, I think Rovals present a challenge, yes, but I think it's a welcome challenge. Um, I don't know if we need more of them, and they probably need to spread out the ones we've got. But yeah, it wouldn't bother me if they introduce more. And I miss running Watkins Glen every year and tracks like that. So I like the Roval, and I hope it stays. Mikey.
The Roval I've never been a fan of. It just doesn't look right with a NASCAR. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't look right. And they don't do well. I always hated the term road course ringer, or the ringers. I've never been a fan. I think it's more of an attraction than a race for NASCAR. You know what I mean?
Let me ask you this real quick. Let me ask you this. So this past year at Le Mans, Garage 56 ran a NASCAR at Le Mans.
Mm-hmm.
What if teams built two separate cars so that it looked more?
Well, so I enjoyed Le Mans. I enjoyed that car. But do you get into, okay, we build this car for this car for this? Well, we already have GTs that run that, or we build a NASCAR into a GT. Well, we already have that series. And that's kind of why I was like, okay, let's take these bricks and put them around a road course that's why I think I see it as more of an attraction.
Yeah. But you look at as we segue into some Formula One and IndyCar. To me, the road course for them is their bread and butter, because at that point, I think it really settles the whole thing down to strategy, or boils it down to strategy, because they can plan for an oval. They know exactly how many laps that car is going to do before it needs fuel and tires, and whether it's scuffs or primaries or alternates on IndyCar. Or whether it's soft, medium, and hard on F1, they know exactly what that car is going to do. And Rovals, or road courses, if you will, give them the opportunity to say, hey, so we can come in on this and we can undercut this guy as long as we have this increment of time ahead or behind. Um, and you know, I think F1 cars on ovals would be absolutely horrible. It would be horrid. I mean, I would like to see one time just for a gimmick, but I think it wouldn't be. I think you just see all the cars going around in a circle, and then one car going zer 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 zer, and it'd be Max Verstappen. Just
Well, then you would
everybody,
see Checo.
yeah,
Track limits, hell, and then
yeah,
he's across
being
the
the
highway
wall,
somewhere.
and everybody's 17 laps down because nobody can catch that Red Bull car. But um, now the thing that F1 does that nobody else does is the street course, which is not to be confused with the road course. So the street course, and we have, how many of them do we have? We have Monaco, we have Singapore, and we have Baku. And technically we have Abu Dhabi, but I personally think that's a purpose-built road course. But those are ran on literally downtown city streets. And you want to talk about, those are challenging courses. Where qualifying is everything. If you don't qualify up front, you're not going to be up front. Overtakes are at a premium because there may be one spot on the entire circuit where you can overtake. So you really have to plan that out and hit your marks. It can produce some boring racing though. That's the downside. You watch Monaco, and if your driver starts 15th, the chances of him finishing 15th are fairly high. There's 2-3 places tops you can get somebody at Monaco. So a lot of those races start and end the exact same way. And I realize there can be some boredom to that, but there's times when they've produced some great racing. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on street courses?
Street courses are my favorite. I'll just say that. Yeah,
it's my
I
favorite
know.
ones to sim. I enjoy driving. Baku's one of my favorite places to drive,
Golly.
sim racing wise.
I just spent all week driving Singapore, and it's brutal.
Yeah, Singapore's. Yeah, you get like early onset rheumatoid arthritis from driving Singapore. Man, it's brutal.
At watching, and it's so tight.
Yeah,
and golly, they're on the edge. Just the castle turn.
Yeah.
How do they fit through there?
I think that's one of the most brutal turns in all of racing is the castle turn at Azerbaijan or Baku, whatever you want to call it.
I like a race where it makes me nervous.
Yeah.
And a street race, it makes me nervous.
Yeah, man.
And of course, it's fun in Singapore. The next day or the next week, you're seeing pictures. Hey, George Russell's favorite corner, and it's just a regular, street.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, that we're hitting the end of our hour here, but that's the 2023 edition of the great track debate, and I'm sure there'll be a 2024 edition. So, Mikey, you want to close us out, man?
Oh, I don't really have much. Of course, anything extra that I had can wait. We don't have nothing going on in WEC other than the field expanding for hypercar, and that's going to be something else next year.
Yeah, it is.
I think they've really got a lot of momentum and more teams. I don't know if it's going to hurt the other divisions, with so many hypercars on the grid. But some exciting stuff, and I'll get some more news ready when we get closer to the 8 hour of Bahrain. Did I lose you? Well, Jay must have stepped out on me. He stepped out.
Sorry, guy. I
You
I had a
stepped
house
out.
emergency.
I gave you some dead air, but I'll have
Yeah,
some more on
sorry.
that when we get closer to the 8 hour of Bahrain, and we can set up for next season's endurance.
Man, we need to figure out if we can get together for the 8 hour of Bahrain and find a way to watch it. I'm still trying to find ways to watch WEC is weird because you can't always do it on YouTube. And the one place you can watch it, it's like $149 a year to watch like 6 races,
Yeah.
which you just really can't justify that unless you're splitting it with like 10 people. So, but we do have, not this weekend, but next weekend the following weekend we have COTA for Formula One, the American Grand Prix, the Haas Racing Home Grand Prix, where they will still finish P17 and 18 probably. But it's Danny Ricciardo's comeback. So looking forward to that. There's no way he's missing Texas. It's his favorite race.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have something for you next week on that. I want to call him out. I want to challenge Danny Ricciardo.
You don't want to give me a little teaser?
Well, I just want him to prove it to me.
Okay.
I hear great things. I've seen nothing.
Well,
Show
yeah,
me
you kind of came to the party late, but you have watched DTS, so I know the backstory on him, and I'm not going to disagree with you, man. I want to see more. I feel bad because they put him in a shit car, so we're still not going to get the Danny Ricciardo that I know's in there. And the one time that they put him in the Red Bull car for practice, he put up a time that would have qualified for the pole for the front row.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm just saying.
Hey, you Chad, y'all. Danny Ricciardo's the best. He's the greatest guy. He's the greatest driver. Everybody loves him, right? I've seen two things. I've seen him act like a clown and drive like shit.
Okay.
Come to Texas, show me you can drive.
Okay.
Make me believe, Danny.
Well, he's gonna have to do it in a P9 car, but yeah.
Well,
And I've never said
hey,
he was
if
the
he
best
scores
driver.
points in that AlphaTauri, I will
Yeah.
stand up. He will be the top of my podium, and I will stand up and I will give him a little bit more than you gave me for my 8 of 10.
Which your 8 of 10 was great, man, and you're killing everybody. I'm still not convinced you're not somehow worked out how to change your predictions during the race. So yeah, my measly 3 out of 10 this week. Of course, a lot of that was Carlos Sainz's fault. Thanks, man. I didn't know right before the race that he had been pulled. But anyway, we got to get off here, man. So guys, thank you very much for watching or listening or whenever you decide to watch this tonight. And we hope we did a good representation of Qatar and the Charlotte Roval, along with our little debate. And we'll have more debate topics as we get towards the end of the main seasons and move into some of the other seasons that are going to be starting back up. We should have a Goodwood thing coming up here pretty soon, don't we?
I think I've seen something on it today. I'll look into it.
Folks, I do not know what happened there. That was the weirdest thing I've ever heard of. So I've got to hold on just a second. I've got to reinvite Mikey. Wow, that got really messed up right there. Do. There we go. I was looking up Goodwood and trying to figure out when the next race was. And the studio just completely closed there. So I got to get Mikey back in. Anyway, he'll be here in just a second. But yeah, we get towards the season where, and I know it's me and him mainly, but we both enjoy the two big festivals. At Goodwood. So Speed was the Revival. Not till next year, obviously. But where's the Revival? I don't know where we are on the Revival either. Yeah, I already missed that too. So he should be coming back in. But listen, I want to thank everybody tonight for being here. Or whenever you do decide to watch this episode. And I hope it was entertaining for you. Just remember to hit me up on Twitter at jneil729. And you can hit up Mikey, who I'm adding back to the stage. But you can hit him up at 2Diddy4. You can see his name in his little thumbnail right there at 2Diddy4. If you want to hit my son back up, he should be here next week. He had a particularly rough week working this week. He's at JPFreak625. Our long lost compatriot Chad is at Hitch610. And then, of course, Farmer F1 at Farmer F1 for his Twitter. Hit us up if you enjoyed the show. Tell us what you think. If we thought we were full of crap, tell us that too, so we can adjust and overcome. But
hey,
Mikey,
come on board with some F1 play, and
yeah, no joke. Join us on F1
I
Play.
need somebody to challenge me.
Yeah, he does, because we're doing an awful job at it. Although I feel like I'm the only one that is challenging him at all. Some of them are failing to even put in their predictions. Yeah. But folks, we'll be back next week, and we'll be talking NASCAR at Las Vegas, the build up to Rally Germany or Rally Europe, whatever you want to call it. And we'll handle some other racing business and be out of your hair. So thank you very much. You guys have a great evening.